Welcome, everyone. Great to see you again. We're so happy to be back together for day 2 of our training, Racial Justice to the Center, Winning Climate Organizing. Also, day 6 of the Base Building Leadership Academy for those of you who have participated from the start. As we settle, let's make sure that your computer screens are all ready and that we're all ready for today's session. Let's open the Zoom chat function. Can everyone open your Zoom and say hi or your chat and say hi in the chat? And for anyone who is joining us today that wasn't with us yesterday, would you mind dropping a 1 in the chat as well? Awesome. Great. Thanks, everyone. See a 1 or 2. Awesome. Great to see all of you again. You don't need any documents right now open on your screen. We'll share the visuals and documents that you need as you need them. Yesterday was a powerful day, and it was a very full day of training. We shared the systems framing, a set of beliefs and positions that underlies this training. We considered what it means to be in a multiracial space when we are talking about white supremacy culture. We did text rendering to further our understanding of the key terms environmental justice, white supremacy, American environmentalism, and indigenous sovereignty. And we explored a timeline of environmental justice to both expand our understanding of history and to consider from what lineages Mothers Out Front draws. Let's take a couple deep breaths to let the waves of these experiences wash over us. Feel free to take a couple deep breaths on your own.
That felt good, taking some of those deep breaths. Thank you, Jamie. Now we're going to spend 5 minutes journaling quietly on this prompt. What is one lesson, learning, or idea from yesterday that feels the most potent and powerful that I want you to bring forward into my mind and heart today? So again, what is one lesson, learning, or idea from yesterday that feels the most potent and powerful that I want to bring forward into my mind and heart today? And we're going to drop that in the chat so you have it. We're going to spend about 5 minutes. You might recall a phrase you heard that rings loudly for you, or you might journal about several things you learned and distill the key lessons from them. However you want to use this time, the time is yours. And we will come back at 14 past the hour. 14 past the hour. I see that Anya also dropped it in the chat. Thank you so much, Anya. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a nice, restful, thoughtful time journaling. I want to invite you, if you feel moved to do so, to drop into the chat a short phrase that captures the lesson or idea you are bringing forward today. So if you feel so moved, feel free to drop it in the chat. Seeing a couple here. Joanna, I appreciate how do we best incorporate this into our local Mothers Out Front group. We're going to be getting to that today. So I'm glad that was where your mind and heart went today. Sovereignty equals self-determination. Jamie, help me out. What are some that you're seeing? The hidden overlooked centrality of BIPOC folk to the environmental movement in the US. Concept of American environmentalism. Margaret, that was one that I was learning about as well. So I'm glad you brought that into the space. Lois, yeah, the timeline showed me just how far Black environmental justice goes in the United States to the very beginning of the history. Yes. Jamie, are you seeing any that are catching your eye? They're going by quick.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah. Hope. Oh, Jordan, I love that. People are here to learn, and that's beautiful. I agree with you. That's really beautiful. And thank you for bringing that into the space, Jordan.
Unifying all the groups working on climate change. We need to break down those silos.
Yep.
Hope. I'm with you, Jordan. Sharing power. Yes, Susan, I agree.
I hope I say your name right. Galen. Organizing has not been optional for people of color. Yes. All of that. Yes.
I'm going to invite a couple people to come on mic and say a few words about what lesson or idea you want to bring forward. Feel free to decline my invitation to come on mic and speak if you're not comfortable. Billy, would you like to come on and talk a little more about breaking down silos and unifying the groups working on climate change?
Sure, I'd like to know how to do that. First off, it's important because those who are not interested in climate change are looking to have us stay fragmented, because fragmented, we have less power. And I was seeing this in New York where groups are coming together and we're making change because we have so many more people and behind us and with us. And even if they're not actively involved, we're reaching out to groups that sign on to letters. So yeah, it's the Mothers Out Front theory of change. The more people we have working towards a common goal, the more chance we have of succeeding in achieving it.
Absolutely, well said. Stephanie, I'm going to spell your last name, S-C-H-W-A-M. Please feel free to give us the correct pronunciation if you'd like. And would you like to come off on the mic and tell us more about your comment?
Yeah, my last name is Schwang.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm really beginning to see more clearly how much capitalism is a root cause of planetary destruction and racism in our country. And, yeah, just really seeing that in certain acts and seeing through the ways we've been brainwashed into thinking they're not connected.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good observation, and I agree. Jordan, how about, would you like to talk a little more about the hope that you're feeling?
Yeah, Jamie actually told me that I have a radicalized hope. And he's told me that before. And I think it's important. I love that people are having that same feeling and coming to learn about all the intersectionality that goes into environmental justice. And that's just beautiful to me. I love that. And I'm hopeful that we're going to get somewhere.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Jamie, you think that's good? Is there anybody else who might want to come off mic, or anyone you saw that was a comment that you wanted to ask?
I think that's good for me. Would you like to?
I think so too. Thank you all so much for sharing. Like, sometimes that can be a little anxiety producing for me. I don't know about you. So thank you for being so open and sharing and coming on screen and telling us what you were thinking about as we are getting started today. We're going to spend our time this evening focusing on 3 goals. I'm going to drop them into the chat and then ask someone to type stack, if you remember that from yesterday, stack in the chat to volunteer to read the goals out loud, slowly, and of course, because it's a Sunday afternoon or evening, depending where you are, enthusiastically. We're so excited to be back today. So let me drop these into the chat for folks. Yep. Thank you, Sheila. And do I have a volunteer? It looks like Stephanie. Oh, you were showing how to do a stack is what I'm thinking, right? Nora, great. Nora, thank you so much. Will you read what is in the chat about what we're trying to accomplish today?
Absolutely. It's the one that Sheila just dropped in. Okay, great. Understanding how racism and inequities can show up throughout different levels of our work is number 1. Number 2, introducing tools or assessing and taking actions towards dismantling white supremacy culture. Number 3, understanding how to engage members and volunteers equitably in a multiracial organizing context.
Nora, thank you so much. I so appreciate it.
Well,
Today, we are going to engage in 2 main activities that advance the goals that Nora just told us about. For the first, we will tell you a story that illustrates how white supremacy culture as a system of oppression operates at different levels inside climate organizing. For the second activity, we will be spending time in small groups, learning tools and discussing principles and approaches in service of more effective multiracial organizing. So are you with me? Show me on the video or in the chat if you are here for it. Give me a thumbs up. Wave your hands if you know. Yes, love the celebratory emoji. Jordan's got that hope theme running strong today. Awesome. Yes, sign me up, Claire. I'm there with you. All right, y'all. We're ready to do this together.
All right, good to see everybody today. I'm still Sheila, so I haven't introduced myself yet today. We're going to use a tool that helps us understand how systemic oppression, and in this case, white supremacy with a touch of gender oppression, operates and impacts climate organizing movements and our organizations working inside. This tool was first developed by the Unitarian Universalist Youth Anti-Racist Working Group in the early 1990s. Since then, it has been used, adapted, and enhanced by many movement educators and organizers. To understand this tool, we're going to start by watching a short video created by the Fireweed Collective, formerly known as the Icarus Project. Get comfy, and as you take in this video, it will be about 5 minutes long.
When we are sailing the high seas of life, oppression is a lot like an iceberg. Imagine you're on a ship, chugging along, when the captain spots an iceberg on the horizon. At first, it looks like it will be easy to navigate, but this is no ordinary iceberg. This is an iceberg of oppression, and it's big. What we can't see is dangerous. The tip of the iceberg is easiest to spot. That's where interpersonal oppression occurs. This is the stuff that happens directly to individuals, such as a mosque being attacked by an Islamophobic group, a woman being catcalled by a man, or a young person of color being followed around by a store clerk. Society teaches us oppressive ideas about different social groups. Over time, our perception of them is altered consciously and unconsciously. We then internalize and act on them on an individual level. These common acts of oppression can cause deep emotional harm and psychological distress. This is the part we can see. Just beneath the surface is institutional oppression. Institutions are systems and structures that influence and govern society, such as healthcare, schools, media, banks, and the legal system. Institutional oppression is rooted and upheld by systematic rules, laws, policies, and practices. This occurs when law enforcement organizations use stop and frisk practices. Schools teach a white upper-class biased version of history. Governments pass discriminatory laws against immigrants, transgender, or disadvantaged people. These practices are rooted in long histories of slavery, colonialism, capitalist exploitation, imperialist wars, and gender restrictions. Institutional oppression creates trauma and difficulties for individuals in their daily lives. If we go still deeper, we'll find cultural oppression. Some examples include the assumption that people are poor or depressed because they are lazy and stupid. Physical space is designed only for people who can walk. Postal deliveries scheduled around Christian holidays. When oppressive actions and beliefs are considered normal, then institutional oppression is created and maintained as right. This in turn feeds interpersonal oppression. It's a vicious cycle. Oppressive beliefs can become so widespread that they are internalized by both those who are targeted by them and those who benefit from them. To navigate around the iceberg, it's vital that people at each level of the ship have a say. The privileged people on the top deck can't see what's beneath the surface. They have to trust the experience and knowledge of those below deck. Our ship is safe and sound only when those most impacted by the oppression iceberg determine how to address its impact. Systems of oppression not only manifest in our jobs and our relationships, but also in our own hearts and minds. In order to dismantle these systems, we have to engage with all levels of the ship to avert the iceberg. We have so much to learn from each other. Let's get free together.
Should we do some solo reflection after taking in that video?
Yes, thank you, Anya. So let's take 5 minutes to do a little solo reflection. You can journal or just reflect on, what you saw, how that impacted you, maybe themes you're thinking about from the last 2 days that brought up for you. And we will come back at 34 after the hour. So we'll put on some soft music and do a little solo reflection.
I see a lot of people are writing away. I want to invite you to drop a question you're sitting with after watching that video into the chat. We're not going to try and answer every question, but we'll answer a few so that we can gain some insight about the group's learning. So let's start dropping things in the chat. One question that you're sitting with. That's great. Thank you, Sue, Billy. Let's wait for some more questions so we can synthesize them a little bit. Okay, these are coming in hot. Okay, I see some questions about how each of these layers are kind of interrelated. So show of hands who felt like institutional and systemic or cultural oppression felt really linked. Did you feel that? Yeah, the first time I saw the video, I felt that too. And then I realized as the video went on that they are connected. They dictate how we show up, and we make up institutions. So they dictate how institutions show up too. I do see some questions about how do we engage authentically? How do I start even? How do I work with a very segregated group? Well, lucky for you, that's what our next session is all about. How do we integrate this work into our day-to-day work at Mothers Out Front? I see some questions about how do we engage with oppressed people to listen and learn from them? You know, this is step number one, you know, us opening our minds, broadening our horizons to what is out there is step number one. And as you'll see in the next section, we'll go step by step as to like, how do we put these into action? How to engage authentically and not be perceived as transactional or tokenistic. That's coming up too. Yeah, majority voices, right? How do we allow minority voices to be heard without getting drowned? Yeah, you all are all making up a case for what's coming up next. And we'll talk about how do we find local orgs. I might put some of these resources in the chat. I did see a comment about the iceberg as a metaphor and not liking it because it feels like it's something that we can navigate around. I really love that comment, Leanne, because yeah, why are we navigating around it? Why aren't we plowing right into it and breaking it? So maybe we get one of those boats that break up ice. Maybe that can be the next version of this video, is something that just dismantles it. But for now, I think it might be a good enough video to start us thinking along that line. But thank you for that comment. I really want to uplift Jordan's comment on how have these factual concepts not yet reached into the systems and tore it to bits. That speaks to our white supremacy culture that we are all swimming in. And it needs dismantling from the inside. So thank you for that question. I would encourage all of us to sit with that a little bit. and reflect on it on our own. Is it going to be 20 years from now when our kids are out of school, in college, or are they still dealing with this? It's something for us to think about. How do we open communications with others on the ship? What is the job of the people on the top deck? Listening to the people on the bottom deck, trying to empower the people on the bottom deck so that they don't have to make up a telephone to call the top deck. How do we normalize a culture shift, addresses poverty and climate change? And I also saw another comment about how do we deal with all of this without dealing with consumerism and capitalism? Those are all really good questions, and it's all interrelated. Poverty, climate change, cultural oppression. How to accept, offer, ask for help. How do we be good allies? How do we be good accomplices? Yeah, Rebecca, I hear you. I think for a lot of people, hearing more examples of how white men and women are suffering negative consequences, that will really make it easy to understand that everyone's impacted by it. And we can share a little bit if people feel so inclined to share in the chat any examples of how you feel white women and men are suffering negative consequences of white supremacy. Okay, I'm going to read through some of these other ones, but I know we had some people raising their hands. Do you all want to get on, unmute yourself and ask your question? Or is that a comment on another question? I don't see any hands up anymore. Did I answer it all? Wow, great job. How do we transmit cultural values without transmitting the old dividing narratives? Well, step number 1, this training. Step number 2, tell everyone how you're doing it. In Mothers Out Front, make that the norm. Dangerous, yeah. Oh, Anita, I love this. I saw a quote recently. We are not in the same boat, we are in the same storm. Some in yachts, some in canoes, some are drowning. How do we lift all boats, canoes, and people that are drowning? Melting the iceberg, yeah. Yes, Randy, this is, in this one instance, iceberg melting is great. And we'll talk a little bit, Judy, about how we overcome barriers. Yeah, privilege, you know, we saw in the timeline yesterday, the last piece of the timeline was talking about Ted Cruz running away from impacts of climate change. And it does feel like privileged people do feel like their privilege can protect their children from climate change, but to a certain extent, maybe, yeah, not forever. Yeah, so much of white supremacy culture is tied to the things that we all think means, you know, to be good, to be educated, intelligent, perfectionist. And it's a real journey to see how those are all connected. Thank you for that, Velma. I really like what you're saying. Not appropriate to equate the damage done by oppression to the oppressed people with damage done to the privileged class. Yeah, it's not equal, but everyone's impacted just the same. All right. Anyone want to stack and say anything that's coming up so we know to make sure to cover it in the next section? Velma, go for it.
Excuse me. I just wanted to comment that something we talk about from time to time is the privilege involves a state of fear, a fear of the oppressed people, fear of recognizing oneself as somebody that you might not necessarily like, fear of losing privilege. Jamie it says from time to time, and I'm paraphrasing it and probably butchering it, but to people who've spent their lives being privileged, equity can look like oppression. And so sorry for not getting the quote exactly right. But I think those fears are a lot of what hold people. The fears that are also fears that are engendered by those that benefit under capitalism and corporatism. Thanks. That like divisive fears, like telling the privileged people that the oppressed people are going to come and take their jobs, or that the theory of scarcity and all that. Exactly, Stephanie, I appreciate that very much. And people living with that fear cramps their identity, it cramps who they are. But it's hard to stop being something you don't want to admit you're doing. So I'll leave off.
Thank you, Wilma. Wilma is one of our newest national leadership team members, and I feel so privileged to be on it with her. Thank you so much. You know, in the video they showed a slide in which, you know, that person's like heart breaks because of all these things that are being internalized, and that to me would be how it's affecting people with, you know, mental illnesses, right? Because that fear, it does that to you. Anita, someone said Zach. Anne, are you going to sing for us?
I am not, but Velma, I wanted to give a visual of what you said about when you're used to privilege, equity feels like oppression. So somebody introduced that concept to me like this. So here's an equal relationship. And if the relationship has been like this, then coming to this feels like that to this person. I just think that's
wow.
I find that a helpful way to remember it.
That's a wonderful way to remind us, and also kind of center ourselves when someone is saying that this doesn't affect me. Just remind ourselves and remind them. Thanks, Anne. Joanna, let me know if I'm missing someone in the stack.
Hi. This is another angle of the question, but I've had a wonderful experience I want to share because it could be duplicated, which is in a climate action group that I'm in. There was a conversation with a BIPOC group, and they were very clear that they did not want white people to take over, but they wanted their work to be witnessed. And so 4 people of my group, this was a Zoom, so it made it easy. But this was, you know, early in the pandemic, we simply went to their meetings quietly. And we didn't propose things, we mostly kept our mouths shut. And we were just there a week, you know, every, like once a month for, you know, as time went on, and got to know them, and then participated in things they were doing as, you know, arms and legs and so forth. But it was really an honor for us. And my feeling of it is, we were sort of, sometimes we were asking like, what are we doing? What are we doing, you know? And I just, after a while, got it, that what we're doing is witnessing people who are doing lots who have not been witnessed by these, you know, busybody white people. And that it was an honor to be there yeah, there's more, but that's enough. It's just there is a way, there are ways into that world. And it doesn't always look like that. Yeah. That's all.
That is so powerful, Joanna, and kudos for already starting the work. I wish more people did that.
They will.
They will. They will. And you know, if we need to show them the way, then we show them the way. Anyone else? I don't see any stack. Any of the other facilitators want to answer any questions that I might have missed?
Thanks, Anya. I did notice Randy's comment about asking, is power a zero-sum game, though? I think that's an interesting concept, but I also feel like we all live with power, right? Whether it's internalized power, whether it's power from the government, like power, it may be a zero-sum game, but I want to bend it towards the arc of justice, right? I want to make sure, even if at the end of the day, it ends up zero-sum, that we are first making it equal and equitable. And right now, power is not equal and equitable in this country. So let's hope that maybe someday we get to a zero-sum around power. Let's hear, sorry, I'll get on my soapbox about let's get rid of capitalism, let's get rid of homophobia, let's get rid of racism, let's get rid of the penal system. But right now, in the structure and communities that we are in, power is there and it is unavoidable. And so I hope that what we're doing here at Mothers Out Front is starting to shift, right? We're putting the power where it belongs and where it has been stripped from so many for so long.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, I think we should leave this with Rachel's observing without judging, interfering, giving attention. That is powerful. You're trying to build more additional new power, right? Whew, I'm feeling so amazing after reading all of this and hearing from all of you. Should we take a break now? Sit with it a little bit? All right, 20 minutes. Let's take 20 minutes. Do people feel like they need a break at this point? Nod your head, no? Oh my God, okay. A 10-minute break? Anita, is that what you're saying? All right, should we take a 10-minute break and come back? Just maybe a bio break, and we'll come back energized. This group is just so excited, so let's get into it. All right, come back at 2 after the hour. See you then. One more minute.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. If you haven't made it back now, if you hear my voice, slowly make yourself closer to your device. We hope you had a great break. Let's take a few minutes to get grounded and rooted in our bodies, in our spirits, and where we are going next. So I invite you to keep your camera on or off. But I'm just going to lead us through a few optional stretches. And if this isn't for you, thank you, Thelma. And if this isn't for you, that's okay. Just listen to your own body and just go at your own pace. All right, so just take a deep breath and get as tall and long as you can. Maybe that means stretching your spine upright, holding your head tall, flexing your toes. Do that for a minute and exhale. And if that feels good for you, let's do that again. So take a deep breath. Get as tall and long as you can. For some of you, stretch your spine, then exhale. All right, so many of us, we hold a lot of tension in our neck and in our shoulders. And so let's just give some attention to your neck and shoulders. And so that might mean just rotating your neck. And you can do this at your own pace. For me, it's always easier to roll one way than it is the other. And if you're able, work the opposite direction. Next, let's give some attention to our breath. And for those of you that are impatient, you're like, I don't know why we're stretching. We're supposed to be talking about white supremacy culture. Having a sense of urgency is a characteristic of white supremacy culture, okay? And so giving ourselves time for self-care is something we have to learn or unlearn. So let's just give some attention to our breath, all right? So as you take slow and deep breaths, I want you to remember that breathing calms our bodies down. It calms our brains down. Breathing slowly and deeply helps us move anxiety, worry, stress, irritation, self-doubt. We are all here because we are committed to racially just world. We're all people, we're all parents, we're all kids, we're all children, where we can thrive together. So let's take 5 deep and slow breaths to center that thought, all right? So inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Do this one at your last pace, at your own pace, based on what you know you can handle, and try to stretch yourself a little. Thank you all for joining me with this. So we are going to spend the rest of our time in smaller groups. And we're going to do this with a handout called Effective Multiracial Organizing. And we're going to take these lessons with us, okay, from yesterday, those conversations that we had around terminology and around the meaning, around that EJ timeline, around the legacy and leadership, and from earlier today about the iceberg of oppression. All right, now you get to decide which room you want to join. Okay, and so there's going to be different options that are going to be available for you. It's going to be rural, suburban, urban, and BIPOC only, just like yesterday. Let me just turn my music down a little bit. Sorry, y'all. Just like yesterday. So you'll notice that we have one breakout room option that is just for participants of color. Some of you might have experienced with caucusing or affinity groups where people circle up based on a shared point of identity. I just want to make sure that this is optional. If you're a person of color and you're like, hey, I'm fine with you going into the rural room or suburban or urban, that's fine. We also just wanted to make space for you to make sure that if that's something that you're interested in, that there is space for you. All right, so of course you can choose any room that they want, but we ask white folks who don't identify as people of color to not select this choice. All right, and so if you are familiar with jumping into a breakout room and you are a Zoom expert and you're like, Stephanie, I have this, go ahead and click and you can hop into your breakout room. But for those of you that are like, Stephanie, I don't know, I feel like I need direction, I just have a little easy slide that I'm going to share with you to show you how to make it to your breakout room. So just give me 1 second. All right. So what this looks like for you is once the breakout rooms are open, you should see a button that appears that says join. You will find it at the bottom of your screen where it has the 4 squares that say breakout rooms. And then when you click that, you would just click which one. We recommend to not let the rooms get bigger than 4. So if over there where it shows like the little 4 little silhouettes of people, if you see 4, try to hop to the other room, urban 2 or urban 3 or suburban 2 or suburban 3. Okay, whoops, let me not go to my notes. Let me bring that over here. Okay, so I'm gonna pass it to you, Beth.
And I am obviously just learning how to unmute myself. Thank you so much for that, Stephanie. I hope everybody feels really centered and refreshed and renewed after Stephanie took us through that. So here are the instructions. You're going to have about 30 minutes in a small group. And like Stephanie said, about 4 people. If you go into a room and you see that there's like 5, 6, 7, maybe jump out of that one and pop into another one. So you're going to have about 30 minutes, small group of about 4 people. Once you're in your small group, you're going to take about 5 minutes to quietly read the handout that Sheila is going to be dropping in the chat for you. After everyone has read that handout, you're going to have a conversation that does 2 things. The first is to make sure the group that you're in understands the language and meaning of parts of the handout. The second thing that you're going to do is discuss where you are getting stuck in your own chapter, in your own team, and how these approaches, along with the wisdom of your group, of which we have a lot of wisdom here. So along with the wisdom of your group, how can it support you and your chapter to organize more effectively for racial justice? When we come back, we'll ask you, so identify in your group one person from your group who's ready to rep the group for a short share back activity. Is that clear to everyone? It will be super clear when you get into your groups. You're going to make sure that the group understands the language and meaning of the parts of the handout. And then you're going to discuss where you're getting stuck in your own chapter or team and how these approaches, along with the wisdom of your group, can support you and your chapter to organize more effectively for racial justice. And remember, identify one person from your group who is ready to rep the group for a short share back activity when we come back. Are you ready? I think we are opening up the rooms. So good luck, have powerful conversations, and we'll see you back here in about 30 minutes.
a few people who may just want to tell us which room to move you into. So I'm just gonna either ask you drop into the chat, move me to, and tell us if you want rural, urban, suburban, or BIPOC. Or you can speak up and I'll just start calling on people if I see that you haven't dropped anything into the chat yet to make sure you got your instructions. So Robin, Weston, where do you want to go? And make sure to unmute yourself.
Suburban 5.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, you'd be alone there, so I'm gonna move you to Suburban 2. I might have moved you to 5. Let me figure that out. Yeah, I'm gonna move you back to a place where there's people.
Is it unstable of people?
Yeah, there's another person in the room I just moved you to. If you want to click on, hopefully something has popped up. And then Joan Lancourt, where do you want to go? You have to unmute yourself.
How about Suburban 2?
Okay. I'll move you to a suburban room that needs people. If that's 2, that will work.
Yeah, there's only 3 people in there now.
Okay, great. Thank you. You should see something pop up now. Okay. Mina, where would you like to go? And unmute yourself. Oh, Mina was tagged or pinned or whatever. Robin, did you see something pop up to move? I added you to the room you asked for, but I don't know if you saw it.
I don't see it.
Okay. You said suburban something, is that right?
Suburban 5?
Stephanie or Jamie, if you see her now, I'm like,
I think she found it. She made it to Suburban 5, but she made it to Suburban 5.
Yeah, I think
that's everyone.
Let me try and call Beth back.
Alicia, is there a group you want to go in to just observe? Suburban, rural, urban? Is there anyone you're interested in?
Sure. What would you guys need? What should I watch out for? Because I had to leave a little bit early yesterday, so I wasn't able to see how.
Thank you. As facilitators, we will be here off camera listening, but we won't be directing your conversation. Okay. So now what I'm going to ask is I would like to invite one person from a rural small group to put rural in their breakout group number in the chat, please. All right. So I see folks are saying you didn't choose a person. No worries. This is now the moment of truth where someone is just going to hop in and say that they're willing to do it. So if you are from a rural breakout group, all I'm asking you to do is if you want to be a part of the fishbowl, to put rural in your breakout group number into the chat. And then while we're waiting for some rural folks to get, yes. Yes, and while we're waiting for some folks, for that group, I'll also invite one person from urban small group to either raise your hand if you are unable to get to the chat or share urban in the chat. Thank you, Margaret. You don't know what number? Okay, that's fine. So we have Max and Margaret. All right, so let's move to suburban. So one person who was in a breakout group of suburban, can you just hop and just put your name in the chat? Okay, Andrea says she's gonna offer someone else from suburban. Okay. So let's get someone else from suburban to offer themselves up. All right, and as I do that, I will work on setting. Okay, the fishbowl up. Give me 1 second.
Okay, Claire from Suburban, great.
Thank you. All right, I'm trying to give folks, okay, Max, all right. If you will start appearing on the screen, and what I'm going to ask for everyone else is for you to turn your camera off if you are not going to be the representative for your group. All right.
And we need one from the BIPOC group.
Yes, thank you for that, Anya. I'm like trying to find participants. All right. All right, and so for my folks who are going to be speaking, your camera should stay on. And so I see you, Margaret. So I'm going to spotlight you. And then I also see, I'm sorry, I lost the chat. Okay, Claire. All right, thank you. All right, and then who is the person who's going to be representing from the BIPOC group? That's fine, Andrea. Do we have anyone else that wants to volunteer for that group while we're waiting? Right, I'm going to turn my video off. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mina. So I'm just going to, for our off-camera participants, we invite you to listen for connections, ahas, new opportunities, and ideas you can implement in your organizing work. So for fish bowlers, this is a prompt we have for you. What was a place of energy your group lingered on?
I could start. I think we all had, there were three of us, and especially two of us really felt like we were coming from the home space, like sort of, you know, house parties and getting to know people that we knew and entering into a time of coalition building, especially in Boston and in Amherst, where we tend to be pretty segregated, but near communities that we want to be involved with. Finding coalitions to work with has been our mode of entry, and it works great because coalitions who are already involved in neighborhoods that we're less familiar with understand the issues, and we can go as observers until we're needed. We've been able to be helpful in signing letters for legislators and bringing some of our expertise in legislative work. So I think that's been helpful. And we have found offering webinars of general interest around things like municipal aggregation, electricity, that crosses borders has also been a great way to offer a service that is appreciated and has allowed us to cross borders. So that idea of learning and changing mindset from home space to coalition space, I think, was an area that we had a lot of energy around.
Great. Margaret, did you want to jump in?
No, you go first.
Sure. So I think thinking about the energy piece, one thing that we talked a lot about several things, but one thing that we ended up landing on near the end was talking about in Arlington, Massachusetts. There were a few of us on the call from Arlington and the region, and we're sharing how in an upcoming town day, we're planning for a listening booth at the town day. So at the Mothers Out Front booth, and having kind of a listening stool, or having someone that travels through the crowd and being there to be in listen mode. And we kind of dug into that a little bit as a way of perhaps hearing different voices, hearing different framing on the climate challenges, and maybe, you know, opportunities to learn from other groups or other people, and allowing us to taking space to listen and learn and think about how we can take that back to our work.
Yeah, shall I speak? Yeah, so thank you. But what both of you talked about, coalition spaces and listening, are things that we have been working on in Massachusetts. So both of you are in Massachusetts, but on different levels. So it's really interesting to hear that here. In our small group, we were thinking about how we can build on our identity as mothers to think about what do we have in common with other people, and being open to non-climate issues from that perspective. One of the items on the list was about not focusing just on individual consumer issues, which is, I think, an error that we've made in Massachusetts, because those issues have been ones where you can only participate if you spend more money. So thinking about what we have in common, but also keeping in mind people's different circumstances and what can we do together that is not going to be exclusionary.
So in our group, we talked for a bit about the sentence, and Suzanne brought this up, at the pace of trust, like acting at the pace of trust. So I guess the two parts, the one part is acknowledging discomfort with taking the risk and doing something different than we usually do it, which means reaching out to people who are not a part of our usual group, figuring out how to do that in the friendliest, easiest way, way that's understandable, not full of acronyms and things. And also just the process, like we all really enjoyed, and I forget her name and I apologize for this, the woman who talked about how in her chapter, they listened on Zoom. They just asked if they could listen. And for us, my whole chapter, we were tweeting, I'm texting, like, oh my God, we got to do that. We have to do that. Like, that's what we have to do, because we have BIPOC, communities in Somerville where I live. And we have, we have interacted with different organizations, but we haven't done that level of listening. So that's where we need to go. And people in our group, we all talked about different things we were working on, trying to step over to that listening piece. But that it's scary because it is something new, just acknowledging that.
I love that when you mentioned the pace of trust, because we grappled with that speed versus, doing it thoughtfully and right. And especially as volunteers, we're already fitting in kind of this work when we have time or space or energy. And so we grappled a little bit in our group of how to slow down to a pace where we're doing it justice and doing it right, and not just checking a box or whatnot, which can be hard when we're all busy or whatnot. But I like that, at the pace of trust.
It makes me think that there is a kind of built-in conflict with the organization's goals of doubling membership in the next year, when we're really talking about stepping back and listening and working at least for Massachusetts, working in a very different way. Maybe other states are in a different place and ramping up more, but for us, it's going to be a bit of a conflict, I think.
Yeah, where we've had interactions with many different families is in generally outdoor events where we create some children's activities. And so we talk to all kinds of people, and we have done some of what you were talking about, Claire, with listening, and we've used Post-its to get people's ideas. But the question is, how do we build from that and continue to engage the person? Because this, in many cases, is not someone who's going to want to come to meetings. So what other activities can we engage people in? And I
Well, there
think-
was, oh, sorry, go on. Sorry, I meant you to mute.
Yeah, I was just mentioning the play groups that you had in Arlington, so that was one.
Right, and we had some too in Somerville, but there was something mentioned, I forget what it was about, I'm just thinking about like next steps. So you have listening groups and then getting involved with these different organizations. Like it was interesting, like, because it got to the different levels of like even not getting too involved with the conflict between organizations. We just want to listen and be part of a new organization. I'm not foreseeing conflict yet, but. Oh, I know what I was thinking is with changing, getting away from things, and you, Mina, you mentioned this, like topics being purely environmental. Like, okay, it's got to be like straightforward. And instead listening to what's important to the community, the BIPOC community, organization, whatever, when they're talking, and then working on that, understanding the intersectionality piece, that is going to be a change for us. Right? I mean, it is, right? It's because in the past, like you mentioned, this, Mina, we would work in Massachusetts on helping people understand that if, it would be cheaper for them to buy into a different way of paying their electricity, like all this stuff, like, and I'm not sure that's really the most important thing. I don't know, to the BIPOC community in Somerville. I don't know.
Yeah, people's realities are different. Some people who live in public housing don't pay for their utilities, so it's irrelevant to them. So we have to know what people's situations are, and you can only know that by talking to people.
Right. What about the video? We had a little pushback about the iceberg video. Some people saw it, said, oh, I've seen that before. Like, so I already know that. but then other people were like, well, it's still useful. I don't know. Did you talk about that at all?
No, but my community is a very divided community. Kind of conservative, liberal. I mean, that cultural piece is not there, but we have a chapter member who is brainstorming right now about how we're going to bridge that divide in our community, because no other organization is really working across that divide.
So the divide is political?
Very, yeah.
Really? I didn't know that.
Really strong.
I had no idea. Massachusetts is so liberal.
Yeah. New residents versus old residents, people wanting to calm traffic and people not wanting to change traffic and just locking in, and the bike lobby. I mean, just so much crazy ugliness.
Yeah. We
Amazing.
talked in our group too a bit about, we talked about the racial diversity or lack thereof, but then also the class and the kind of the old and the new of Arlington, and how, Arlington used to be very working class, and now it has a lot more upper middle class, and there is that kind of differences that sometimes come out in there can be tension around that for sure.
Right.
So thinking about widening the umbrella for and looking across different lenses, racial and class and otherwise.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for that point, Claire. That's what I was just about to say as far as bringing this fishbowl back in is often when we talk about this, there's assumptions we make around if an area is liberal, right? Or if an area is conservative, but we also have to consider that class is a part of both, right? And so there can be well-off folks who have their own positionality and idea on how we can get to climate justice that may put the onus on the individual, right? Where someone who has access to funds, they can get those things for themselves. And so it's often important when we do this that we unpack our implicit assumptions that just because the city is liberal or because it's progressive, that it doesn't mean that there's classism not at play here, right? And how power shows up. All right, so I appreciate you all for being a part of this fishbowl. And what we're going to do is, since we have some extra time, we're going to make space for another fishbowl. So for those of you that aren't a part of the breakout groups, for the folks here as reps, if you would just share suburban, urban, or rural in the chat, so then we can get you set up for the fishbowl. And thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Max. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Mina.
Susan, can I ask you to volunteer? This is Beth. I know that you said that you might be willing to do that. So if you would just drop in the chat. I know that you were a suburban group, I think, but I'm not sure. No, you were in urban. You were in urban 3.
I was
And
in
if there
urban
are-
too.
And
Oh,
if there are
okay.
other facilitators that can spotlight people, if you could help me just for this part. Thank you.
Looks like Anne Boland. Anne, I hope I said your last name correctly, is suburban. Rita.
I'm from Massachusetts. I know people were talking about getting other people in. So if there's somebody else suburban from not Massachusetts.
All
that'd
right,
be
well,
fine with
let's
me.
hold you for a minute.
Okay.
We've got Rita in urban. Let's see. Velma. Velma was in the same group as Max, but do we have another rural group? If not, maybe Velma, you could be in that group representing. And do we have any other folks from our BIPOC group who would like to participate? So Stephanie, how about if we add Velma? I didn't see anybody else rural. Am I missing anybody? Come off mic and speak up if I'm, or come on mic and speak up if I'm missing anybody else. And Wild Rose has offered to join the BIPOC group. Were you in? Oh, Wild Rose, I'm going to hold off on you. And I want to make sure I say your name right. Folake. Would you please pronounce your name for me?
Sorry. Hi, my name is Falake.
Hi, Falake. Thank you so much. Do you mind being in the group as a member of the BIPOC group that was meeting?
Yeah, I can do it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can I suggest Wild Rose for the suburban group, because she was in a suburban group and she's from Colorado, so it's not Massachusetts.
I mean, I think we're set, but Anne, if you want to you were suburban. If you want to step back, and Wild Rose, if you would like to step in, I think that's
That's fine with me because we did get a lot of Massachusetts perspective there, I think, before.
Thank you, Anne. That's very gracious of you. I appreciate it. All right, so we're going to drop in Wild Rose for the suburban group in place of Anne.
Okay, I'm trying to add you, but it will not let me until you accept the request to share video. If you don't want to come on video, that's fine. You can like block it, but it won't allow me to spotlight you without that.
How does she do that? Accept that request.
It should pop up like right now to say the host is requesting you to share video.
She hasn't said she wanted to do it.
Okay, I just joined the video.
Oh, there she is.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for joining us for this fish bowler activity. So I'm going to give the same prompt that I gave with the group before. So what was some energy around that your group lingered on? And this is a conversation, so feel free to go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I had mentioned the Take It Down coalition, and the ladies were so impressed with it that the mothers out here were supporting a group that's, I guess, it's a mixed group. I wouldn't say Indigenous led because there's a little bit of everybody in the group. Even Italians are part of our Take It Down coalition. So, but yeah, we were kind of talking about that for a minute, is just making everybody feel welcome in our different groups and reaching out to the different groups in our cities, connecting with everybody. The lady said that they really could learn from what we have going on here. And so I was really happy when they said that.
To
live in
answer
a city
Galen's,
like a lot of eastern cities that are segregated by neighborhood, by culture, by practice, by attitude. And I find that the iceberg metaphor came up in our group because you can't see most of it. And my feeling was that in the groups that I'm in, which are mostly white, people act like they can't see most of the iceberg, that they don't know it's there. It might have taken the Titanic down, but they're not willing to do the work to making friends with people that they might invite in who are Indigenous or Black or gay or whatever. Also, I've noticed in the white groups I'm in that you don't talk about anything that.
I'm sorry. I don't know how you hopped into the fishbowl. Which group were you a part of?
What?
I'm sorry. I don't, which group were you a part of? I don't know how you hopped into the fishbowl. I just didn't get that.
Susan was part of Urban 3.
Okay.
I think she accidentally turned on her mic and started talking, not knowing that only the fishbowl are supposed to be talking right now.
Okay, thank you for that. No worries, Susan. We just want to keep to the fishbowl people so they have time to speak. But if we have time, we can do another round of fishbowl, if that works for you, Susan. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so let's bring ourselves back in here. So for those of you who are representing the different groups, where is some energy that your group lingered?
You can go if you want, Rita.
Okay, thanks. I live in San Diego County in California, and my city is 7 miles from the border with Mexico. My group reached out to other groups, and we had several organizations, including the Environmental Health Organization. And so they were advocating for free bus passes for people 18 and under, and they formed a lifeline of 10 ideas, and then they reached out to us and formed another
Coalition. And then we had the Transportation Equity Working Group. And they came up with the idea of restrooms for all the bus and trolley stops. And then the San Diego Green New Deal Alliance gathered together 51 additional organizations. And now we are all working together on different issues. And that's what we talked about mainly, is forming coalitions, listening to what in our area is called a community of concern, which in other areas could be called low-income community or things like that. I'm done.
Thanks for sharing that, Rita. My group, we focused a bit of time on the iceberg question. And me personally, I found it interesting about how certain things that I consider, or our nation as a whole considers to be the norm, is so deep rooted into our society. I gave an example of when I was in college, how one of our dorm quads was called Indian Quad. And it never once occurred to me that that could be offensive. It was just the name of the quad. And then that, I never had any realization until I graduated, and there was a petition to get that name changed to something more or less offensive. And it was just that is a perfect picture of how certain cultural norms that are offensive are so deep rooted in our society. And a member of our breakout group also mentioned about how certain financial struggles can kind of go over people's heads. We were talking about how certain people might not be able to afford a light bill change of a couple dollars more, and how that is such a significant change for some people. And some individuals might be wowed by that, you really can't afford a couple more dollars, and some people truly can't afford to go that extra couple dollars. So those issues are at the root of our society. And yeah, I think that just viewing it as an iceberg, and how it's not something that we can just simply go around Mina said in our group, and something that it's just deeper than that. So yeah.
Yeah, our group, I really appreciate all y'all's remarks, because they really tie into our group. We really like the handout because it really helped focus on various pitfalls, and we found that in all of our groups we could find examples of almost every one of those pitfalls, even though in Pueblo which Wild Rose is a part of our Mothers Out Front team, and part of our emerging leadership, and new organizing person. And so we're a low income industrial, majority people of color. Well, majority or maybe slightly less depending on which census you read. But that doesn't mean that there aren't divisions within our community, and very strong, intense divisions that go back generations and have to be overcome. And I think I'm really glad to hear the Take It Down campaign really was the subject in your discussion, because it's a good example of an anti-oppression, anti-colonialism movement that has been able to elevate the leadership of the impacted communities, but to provide space for those of us who are not originally from those communities to both learn and also provide our viewpoints. So in our group, the area where we lingered on was how do we, as Jennifer put it, how do we move from individual capacity issues in racism and racial justice to how do we move forward as a group? And we looked at all of those various solutions, and they all came down to, the Fishbowl says the Take It Down campaign. We have the last remaining statue of the historical villain Columbus on public land in Colorado. Apparently there are a few privately owned statues, but this Christopher Columbus, who is painful and traumatizing to people, sits in front of our public library. So people of color, people of indigenous, and especially people of indigenous heritage, have to pass that right under his head, going to of that mythology of American exceptionalism and colonialism to get into one of the centers of learning for our community. So we've been campaigning for about 2 years now almost, to get it taken down. It's owned by the city. And so our city council and our mayor could take it down with a snap of the fingers, but there's a politically connected group that signifies old money and good old boys network. And they identify themselves with the Italian community, but many Italian people don't feel represented by them. And they're basically holding the leash of the elected officials and keeping them from taking the monument down. So we meet once a month at statue. For a year, we met every week and had indigenous dancers, speakers. We had a 4 Directions march that had hundreds of people come from all over the West to participate. So that's Take It Down. Sorry to ramble on about it. You can tell we have strong feelings about it in Pueblo. But in our group, we talked about possibly coalition building for groups, especially groups that are not very diverse, can come first and provide learning for racial justice and equitable interactions that's less personally threatening, and hopefully will result in learning on the individual basis. So that was our discussion. Galen says, who says yuck? They still have one in Worcester. Yeah, he needs to go where the Confederate generals all went. And other colonialists.
Was there any other folks who wanted to share about what energy the group lingered on? Nope, I don't see anything. Well, I just want to say thank you, Velma. You're giving a great example of an intersectionality campaign and how fighting to remove monuments that center colonialism as our American goal and dream is very problematic for our fight against climate justice, right? Or fight for climate justice. So it's really important that when you all think about your teams and your campaigns, that a lot of things intersect and can galvanize and mobilize people, and building that rhythm, Velma, like you were talking about, like each week having people show up and be there is a really great way, one, to show that we're consistent and we're holding accountable justice at all parts, right? Racial justice, climate justice, environmental justice, water justice, utility justice, but knowing that it is uniquely tied to racial justice, because race has been a determining factor on the location of our polluting sites, on the location of resources. And so like fighting colonialism for many of folks, I know it's like, oh, how do we do that? But it's something we have to commit to, right? All right, and so with that, I'm going to, do we have space to do one more fishbowl, Sheila, or are we at time? How are we doing?
Actually, we have about 5 minutes to open it up to the larger group to see what they felt like,
Perfect.
what their reactions are to the fishbowl, and then I'll move us into the next activity. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. So I can ask the prompt again that Sheila just asked, just to make sure, because I know it's a lot. We're hopping around, y'all, so we're almost there. Is share it in your large group here about what you are currently doing in your team or your state to center anti-racism. And this is an opportunity for you all to learn from one another about what you're already doing or what you've even tried. Right, and I'm going to pass it back to you, Sheila.
I will also just offer that y'all are really lucky because there are some of the most talented organizers that I have ever worked with on this call. And so here's your chance, if you feel so moved, to pick their brains, ask them questions. Stephanie, Sheila, Alicia, Jamie are really just fanatically awesome organizers. So if there's something that you have that you want to ask them, please do that now. I'm noticing that Nora is stacked.
Yeah, hi. I just was going to share one thing that my team has tried as far as working to be more accessible generally. Unfortunately, this is something that we did pre-pandemic. So we are hoping to move back into this mode soon when it feels safe to do so. So we're working on making our monthly team meetings in our chapter be a more family-friendly mode. And so we had teamed up with the local Quaker Meeting House, which is right in the center of the city of Ithaca, so walkable from like pretty much any neighborhood in the city of Ithaca. And we had set up our meeting so that we would have a free meal at the beginning that was like a community meal, and we would just rotate within our team to just like make a big pot of lentil soup and have bread and these very simple meals that, you know, the folks preparing that could be reimbursed for through our team funds. So we would all share a community meal, and then we would have childcare in the childcare space of the Quaker meeting. So that was, you know, actually physically separate from the meeting space. And that was an exciting thing. It seemed to be working really well. We didn't get a chance to do a lot of those, but that's just an accessibility piece that my team is trying to get back into.
Yes, thank you for that, Nora. Accessibility is so key. So I believe it's Andra, Andra Rose on Stack.
Yeah, hi,
Go
thanks.
ahead.
So my question is maybe particular to Massachusetts. You know, we're such a developed organization here, And so focused in majority white, middle class, upper middle class communities. And, you know, I think coalition work is what's possible for us. I don't know what people think, and I'd like to hear from our star organizers if you've seen a white dominated organization transform itself, or if that's even the goal in this pivot that Mothers Up Front is making towards equity and justice and inclusion.
Sandra, I can share a group that has not made a full transition, but definitely went through a process. So I worked for SEIU Justice for Janitors, which is a union that works with janitorial members and healthcare members. And, you know, like a lot of unions, the people at the top were white men and staff. And even in like the executive board positions, or, you know, people who were elected to represent their members. And I had the real honor of hearing from someone who had been working there, you know, pointed out all of these like discrepancies between the membership and the population of the membership being much more racially diverse than the population of the e-board and the staff. And just went through this, you know, like decades long process. So it wasn't quick or easy or overnight, but of making a lot of big steps, and still there's a lot to be done. But some of the things that I remember that he shared about that, you know, was like really getting clear on the demographics of the membership. So prior they had been surveying membership and not collecting racial demographics, or then they collected them, but it was like word of mouth, you know, and so of course people's implicit bias came in, or who they knew were overrepresented. And so, you know, they thought that maybe 80% of the membership was white, and it ended up being like 40%. And so they got really clear on how they were going to collect demographic information, and then really clear on the fact that they needed to be changing a lot of the ways that they're like on an executive board, you have certain rules that govern how you function. And so they changed those to remove a lot of barriers that were keeping in the way of people of color being able to be elected by their peers. And I think a lot of people got fired or let go or moved on because they didn't like the changes that were going on. And there's still, again, lots of issues, but it was over the course of a few decades that there was a pretty big change that happened in that union, in that organization. So that's just one example.
The other one that I've seen that, like Sheila said, this is Beth, similar to what Sheila said about it is a long process, Move On, which was traditionally white, male dominated, and it was a member organization similar to us, to Mothers Out Front, that they really focused their work, be it all digital. They focused all of their work on basically what felt like pretty like stale pale male issues for a long time, and that they actually made a conscious decision to shift, and they started with their leadership. They shifted their leadership, they shifted how they were doing business, they shifted their staff. And like Sheila said, yes, again, it's, you know, it's a opportunity for us to change, but also being willing and aware that not everybody is going to feel the same. And so we might be losing people. Move On lost people. I'm sure, as Sheila said, SEIU lost people. But I feel like if it's a conscious decision that we shift, and then we start actually some of the things that were brought up in the fishbowl, start listening to what communities that we seek to represent are saying, and how they are saying it, and how they are asking us to be involved. I think that that goes a long way to starting that process.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Beth. And I think it's important to lift up, y'all, that transformational work is committing to unlearn, right? Like it's us unlearning problematic things and committing to change and grow together. So when, like Velma shared in the chat in 2019, when I was like, hey, you know, this is a climate organization that's really centering the narrative of moms in our fight for climate justice. And which is fighting, you know, for those who are like, oh, we're not fighting the patriarchy. Well, a lot of our moms, y'all know, when you show up to do public comment in spaces, they're predominantly male spaces where we're taking up space, we're validating the existence of our children and the humanization of our communities. And like, that stuff is uncomfortable, right? And so even as a unit, we have to commit to unlearn and to change and to grow and just know that's our end goal. Right? Like our end goal is to grow. And like Beth said, there's going to be some folks who are like, hey, I can't commit to that. I don't have the emotional capacity. I don't, in my life, I don't see why this is relevant. And that's someone else's methodology. But our liberation is bound together. We are not going to get to climate justice by us separating each other and trying to organize in our own silos. We're not going to get there, right? Because the fossil fuel industry is not organizing in a silo, right? Like it's very intentional and collective. So, I just want to make space. I feel like some folks asked a really great question in the chat. Oh, can we address ableism? Disabled bodies are most prone to the effects of climate change, from viruses to increasing of natural disasters. So just to the point earlier, accessibility. The biggest way that folks don't necessarily make it into our movement is due to lack of accessibility, right? So accessibility can be the time of your team meetings, if they're Zoom or if they're in person, if they're at a library that's easy to get to when someone gets off work. Accessibility can be the action we're asking folks to do. Showing up to protest may feel different for folks who are not able-bodied, right? And so those are all like considerations that we each have our own unique positionality and privilege and how we show up in the world. And often all those other factors may not show up when your team is deciding actions and things to do, right? And so also care work is something that moms do in other realms of our work. Exactly. And so sometimes the timing of our events may not be ideal for working moms, right? And that's just something, one, we need to make explicit, but then we need to practice doing better, right? Like shifting it, making accessibility, making meeting notes more accessible and all of those things. Yes. And so I think we still have a few more minutes. I see Alicia said, I was raised by my grandma and my disabled uncle in the home. And this is another place we as moms can lean into our coalition building chops. Yes, every mom has had accessibility issues during some point of their pregnancy or post-baby. Yes, and that's something you have to remind yourself of. You're like, hey, if I was back to my pregnant self, could I be on this call? Could I be on this team? Right? If I was back to, you know, me having multiple folks in my household and doing a remodel and all these crazy things going on and I'm moving, can I be a part of your team? Right? And then asking yourself, what can we do differently to attract folks, right, who are dealing with those other factors? Oh, Mina, you're stacked above. Okay. All right. So Mina, I'll get to you. Velma, I see you raise your hand. Mina, did you stack above?
I did a while back. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see that.
Okay. Yeah, I just had a question for everyone. If we want to involve people who are not going to go to meetings, what kinds of activities have you involved people in an ongoing way, maintaining ongoing relationships with people that are not meetings? I know in Arlington they had activist play groups, so things where people come together and do activities, but it's not a meeting because that's not a mode that works for them.
Yeah,
So
I have a really great example. If my Kansas City team is on the call, this is shout out to you all. Our Kansas City team has been doing monthly socials, happy hours, where either pre-pandemic, they would just meet online and just bring whatever beverage they want and talk and just check in and talk about mom life, right? Or auntie life or whatever that looks like for you. And it was just meant to be a social way that they naturally could bring new moms into a movement, but there was a rhythm for it, right? It's monthly. So if they meet someone at a tabling event, they say, hey, just join our social. And that was a really great entry point for folks before they came to a team meeting where they could at least like mingle, get to know folks. And so, yes, Nikki, thank you. So I know that's something our Kansas City team does really well, but Nikki, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. If you wanted to share a little bit more how it's gone, I would love to pass the mic to you. No pressure. It's okay.
Yeah, I actually don't have a lot to say about it. For myself, happy hour in in-person socials did not really work for me. But we had that, and we also had monthly virtual brunch. So we had a Zoom as well. So we had both options. And, you know, honestly, we're pretty small and we're finding it hard to get many people to either of those. So we're reevaluating. But yeah, it is helpful for some people to be able to have more of a social atmosphere.
Thank you so much for that, Nikki. And I see that Alicia said our monthly action calls are only an hour during lunch around noon Pacific Standard Time so that our working moms can attend, as well as like our stay-at-home moms with babies who are napping midday. So those are some examples. Does anyone else have any examples for Mina before I pass it to Jamie? Okay. So I take that as no, and that's fine. And with that, I will pass it to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks everyone. Your participation through this training has been so amazing and inspiring and just uplifting for all of us. That we really appreciate your commitment of time and focus, vulnerability, curiosity, and showing up to this space and this learning experience. Next, I'd like to give everyone 3 to 5 minutes of quiet to reflect on the following. Head, what's an idea or thought on your mind? Heart, what is something that's moving you? And hands, what is a form of action you are committed to taking? And we're going to drop those prompts in the chat for you. Just again, take about 3 to 5 minutes. We'll come back together after a little reflection, and we'll talk shortly. Feel free to turn off your camera if you'd like, and we'll see you in a few minutes. All right. If you feel moved, we'd like to invite you to drop one of your reflections on either the heart, the head, or the hands in the chat. Anyone feeling like they might want to share? Thank you, Beth. Yeah, I hear you, Billy. Alicia, thank you. These are great. Thank you all. Open-mindedness of others, willingness to change. Thank you, Siavi. Yes. People who showed up for this training on a summer weekend. Yes, we definitely appreciate all of you. Art, appreciating the relentless vision of a new and better world. Yes, same here. Love it. Grateful for the shared wisdom and experiences. Thank you for that art reflection, Carol. There are so many awesome reflections being dropped into the chat. It's really hard to keep up, but we really appreciate all of your participation and thoughtfulness. Yes, Sheila, hands. How we will take this material and understanding and continue to change the way we work in the climate change movement to center racism in a real way. Carol, taking ideas from your urban group back to the MA core leadership team. Excellent. Need to build coalitions. John, thank you for that head reflection. Reaching out to others to listen. Thank you, Rita. Healing. Oh, yes, that's a really awesome one. Okay, thank you for sharing that art reflection. Carol, grateful for the chance to hear and learn from people outside Massachusetts. Amazing to hear all the awesome work going on across the country and different locations, to be able to connect with each other.
I'm gonna jump in and move us to the next part, but thank you for synthesizing those beautiful reflections so well. Stephanie, if you don't mind turning off the music. Thank you all so much. So to close, we're going to read a poem by Aurora Levins Morals, a queer feminist Jew of color who has been writing, whose writing has been a beacon for many in our movements. The poem is called Va'ahavta, which means "and you shall love" in Hebrew. We invite everyone to go off camera or close your eyes if you feel called to, and just get comfortable and close as we read this poem.
All right. Say these words when you lie down and when you rise up, when you go out and when you return, in times of mourning and in times of joy. Inscribe them on your doorpost, embroider them on your garments, tattoo them on your shoulders, teach them to your children, your neighbors, your enemies. Recite them in your sleep. Here in the cruel shadow of empire, another world is possible.
Thus spoke the prophet Roque Dalton. Altogether, they have more death than we, but altogether, we have more life than they. There's more bloody death in their hands than we could ever wield, unless we lay down our souls to become them, and then we will lose everything. So instead, imagine winning. This is your sacred task.
This is your power. Imagine every detail of winning, the exact smell of the summer streets in which no one has been shot, the muscles you have never unclenched from worry, gone soft as newborn skin, the sparkling taste of food when we know that no one on earth is hungry, that the beggars are fed, that the old man under the bridge and the woman wrapping herself in thin sheets in the back seat of a car, and the children who suck on stones, nest under a flock of roofs that keep multiplying their shelter.
Lean with all your being towards that day when the poor and the world shake down a rain of good fortune out of the heavy clouds and justice rolls down like waters. Defend the world in which we win as if it were your child. It is your child. Defend it as if it were your lover. It is your lover. When you inhale and when you exhale, breathe the possibility of another world into the 37.2 trillion cells of your body until it shines with hope. Then imagine more.
Imagine rape is unimaginable. Imagine war is a scarcely credible rumor. That the crimes of our age, the grotesque inhumanities of greed, the sheer and astounding shamelessness of it, the vast fortunes made by stealing lives, the horrible normalcy it came to have is unimaginable to our heirs, the generations of the free. Don't waver. Don't let despair sink its sharp teeth into the throat with which you sing. Escalate your dreams. Make them burn so fiercely that you can follow them down any dark alleyway of history and not lose your way. Make them burn clear as the starry drinking gourd over the grim fog of exhaustion and keep walking. Hold hands, share water, keep imagining so that we and the children of our children's children may live.
Thank you all so much for dedicating yourselves fully to the last 2 days of this training. I know this has been a lot, but if you were a part of the Base Building Leadership Academy, we have a few more announcements before you go and before you hop off. So for those
Sorry,
of you,
Stephanie, for everyone, the announcements are. I apologize.
oh, sorry. So these announcements for everyone, disregard my statement. So for those of you who participated in this series and as a part of the Base Building Leadership Academy, you have completed the last of this series. And so I just want everyone to like celebrate for those who have been here since the beginning. Let's do a little celebration dance. Congratulations, you've made it through. I know it was a lot. It was a lot of time and we appreciate you. We really, 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 really do.
Awesome. And for those of you who are motivated in general by this training now around centering anti-racism in your work at Mothers Out Front, and want to take some next steps in your teams to take action on centering anti-racism in your organizing, we have a lot of ideas bubbling about that. One is if you would be interested in attending a cross-state group meeting to share or brainstorm about what your team is doing or could do to center anti-racism, please drop your name in the chat or you can email me, Sheila Keller, and we're dropping my email into the chat now too.
Yes. And so we have some action calls coming up that you can join. Mothers, parents, allies from all over the country will be talking about gas in the kitchen, an issue that highlights the intersection between health, air quality, climate, and tenants' rights. And so taking action together, we really want to change this public perception around gas stoves. So at Mothers Out Front's Climate Action Call, we'll have seasoned volunteers, some of you who may be who on the call with us now, who will provide background information and clear instructions for actions we will take together. This virtual event is from anywhere, no experience necessary, and we keep it short and to the point so that you can do your action and still continue on with your busy days. And so this National Climate Action Call will be offered at 2 times. August the 23rd, around noon Pacific or 3 p.m. Eastern, and August the 25th. So that's a Tuesday and a Thursday. So that August the 25th is around 9 a.m. Pacific as well as noon Eastern. And this is just us trying to talk about that accessibility where we offer 2 ways and 2 times during the week when folks can be able to take action. And we are going to put this in the chat for you all.
Then also, if you aren't already, please join Mothers Out Front as a paying member. This is at any level, but it just really shows your dedication in a different way than volunteering alone does. It also allows us to become more and more independent from large grantors and be able to, move the way that we wish to as an organization that's really wanting to push centering anti-racism in our work. So we're going to drop a link into the chat to join as a paying member. And if you aren't already, please consider doing so. So thank you everyone again for being here for the last couple of days. I think, as we leave, let's all set the intention that this is the beginning or the middle of taking anti-racist action and learning at Mothers Out Front and not the end. So thanks for showing up, being in community together around this important goal. And I hope you have a beautiful night.
Thank you so much. It's nice to unmute.
Woohoo!
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So wonderful to meet all the new staff and leaders and the ones who've been around for a while, but we get to see you more and get to know you more. This has just been phenomenal. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone.
Bye.
And the poem and the organizers reading it, that was so beautiful and so inspiring. Thank you so much. Thank you for the whole training too.
Thank you, Carol. Definitely take the poem back to your teams. Make it a practice. Make space for it. Thank you.
Yes, you're going to share it with us, right? Good.
Yes, we shared it in the chat, but we'll also make sure you get the links in the follow-up email. Thank you, Carol.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Did you have a question or anything? Or are you just trying to find the leave button? I understand.
I figured out how to remove someone. I was about
Okay.
to